Hi. So this is going to be an attempt to be a little bit more concise and not so much storytelling, but just defining a thing. And then I'm going to do a whole series of looking at versions of the way this particular phenomenon or construction or whatever plays out in my own life. So what it is buttons and hooks or triggers also they get called or being triggered. What happens when somebody pushes your buttons or when your attention and your sympathetic nervous system and all the adrenaline and all the chemistry uh, gets hooked on somebody else's behavior, something they've done, a general situation, um, bad repercussions that have happened to somebody you know. So I, I want to take a longer look at this over a bunch of videos, looking at different particular buttons that I've been able to hunt down in myself. Um, Look at kind of the anatomy of what happens when I get hooked. Um, I've arranged a living situation for myself over the past year and a bit where while I'm in no contact with my parents, I'm not haven't done the full family of origin no contact. Um, I'm in contact with my brother and his family, and I actually live with them. Um, this was a temporary thing that started out with okay. There we go. See, I just started a tangent. I I live with them in a way that started out as just crashing on their couch to avoid commuting traffic. Um, and then I realized that I wanted to move back into the city for a bunch of reasons that were what culminated in my no contact. And when I got back to the city and I rebooted life, I made a couple of bad business arrangements so that I never rebooted my finances properly, and having so it dragged out the fallout from my going no contact. And then eventually I realized that so I was here longer than I meant to be, and then I realized that this is an amazing way because I get triggered. This is an amazing way to work on that stuff and make sure that I don't that I can bring it to that I can bring this generation after generation syndrome in my family of this way of behaving, this way of treating each other, this way of limiting and pigeonholing our lives to an end, or uh, at least stop the unconscious passing on of these built-in fucked upnesses to the next generation um, by living in my brother's family situation temporarily, uh, but month after month, because so many family situations that are similar to the situation within which I built my original system, and all these buttons and hooks into myself, all my susceptibilities, all my weaknesses and triggers, and this is like prime pressure cooker scenario for flare-ups. And then when the flare-up happens, I can, well, first I have to endure it, but if I can, I've learned I've learned how not to act in the moment on the feeling. Um, we'll get into that happens. I think maybe that's the how of it that would probably be a video of its own. But basically, Ross Rosenberg advocates this gray stone. I don't know if that term originated with him or someone else, but I've heard other people mention it too. But it's the best way to deal with a narcissist when you can't just eliminate them from access to you is the gray stone, where you give them no reaction, you give them no food. You're a gray stone. So I'm not capable yet of full gray stone. In other words, I can stop myself from acting in reaction, but the spiked feelings still happen automatically. Like my buttons get pushed and I get upset and I feel the intensity of that rush, that flush. And as we can tell, tone in the room, and as narcissists feed off tone in the room, even if the person isn't full blown person, like disorder narcissist, when we deploy narcissistic traits, even like individual behaviors, even if we don't have the full list on each other, we're still feeding off of people's reactions. We're still feeding off of whatever we've hooked out of that other person. So I'm in this in between area where, of course, the compulsion message, the mortal danger message that is contained within a triggering is the feelings come with an imperative that whatever this external source of these feelings is, because the way buttons work, they tell you that the feeling that you're having was caused by that external person or situation. So the imperative that's contained within the magnitude of the feeling is that you must go and act to eliminate or adjust, or at least not eliminate the source of the cause of your frustration, but at least to affect whatever it is that they're doing that's setting you off at the moment. And there is a mortal danger component to it. You don't actually literally think that you're physically going to die, but certainly there's whether it's like a false self mortality or some kind of ego mortality, like I've said in other places, and I'll continue to struggle with. I don't really understand ego because I've heard it used so many different ways. It's like a word that has been used to refer to so many slightly different or vastly different things that it's a tricky one to use. So I generally try to find something better. Anyway, so I can suspend this imperative to act on the external domino that's caused my flare-up, that's triggered me. I'm not entirely able to stop the swirling thoughts that go into untangle mode. I can witness it now, where I can see my mind doing that, and I can even see it clearly enough to separate the thoughts swirling around, trying to comprehend the situation that somehow hasn't made sense. This is what that is usually contained within a triggering episode. Something is not making sense. So a person who's supposed to be nurturing is acting in a way that's hurt somebody, and they're not doing anything to correct it in a kitchen on a Saturday morning. And I'm in the kitchen as well, so I'm sitting there watching this unfold. Like, for instance, when a kid is upset and they've been upset as an ancillary action of something that a parent's done, and then the parent isn't acting to correct. And it would be so simple just to say, sorry, or I didn't mean that, or you took that the wrong way, or that's okay. Okay, that's a frustration. You wanted to do something today that you can't. Let's come up with something else, so that you're not just wallowing in your frustration there, and building wallowing in frustration into your system as a later button for people to push. So I get very charged at those moments, and it's a super strong impulse for me to caretake the situation. Very, very strong. I actually got married on that impulse once. It's disaster. Utter wreckage of my life. Utter wreckage. But so, okay, so this is what buttons and hooks are. They're this thing that's in our system that is what flares up when narcissists do their little dance. So that means that if these buttons weren't in us, the narcissist's actions would be neutral in their effect, in their charge. They wouldn't be bad, they wouldn't be good, they would just be a thing happening in our environment. There wouldn't be an emotional component to it, there wouldn't be an internal chemical spike component to it, and it would filter through our awareness through regular neutral channels that just look at the information and say, is that something that's of interest to me or matter to me or not? And most of the time, if the thing isn't directly related to us, it would just be filtered out, and we probably wouldn't even notice consciously. Just like you don't notice everybody who walks by you on the street. I think that's how it works. So, minutes? All right, I'm at 13 minutes. So we're going to bring this in and stop instead of going into commentary on it. So we have what I think of as buttons and hooks like a Velcro hook, or like a hook in an old-fashioned button, where people can't set you off if you don't have a button for them to push. You can't get hooked into feeling this compulsion to caretake or act on an external situation or some behavior that somebody else is doing, unless you have a hook built into your system that somehow is interpreting what they're that is interpreting your well-being, and I think of this as my feeling of okayness. Unless I have built into my interpretation and my general feeling interacting system something that says my feeling of okayness is somehow dependent on their behavior being okay, I'm going to be susceptible to being hooked. So what's happened? What I'm saying is that what happens inside a hook when it's happening to me, inside an incident, what's happening when I get hooked, when my attention is hooked and my outer attention is hooked onto them from whatever else I was doing, and then my internal attention is now been sucked into the vortex of swirling around on the figuring, trying to figure it out, either trying to figure out what the fuck, because what they did just doesn't make any sense, or this can happen as well, on a less personally charged but just informational, just intellectual basis, when you get the cognitive dissonance about a piece of information that doesn't make any sense. And that bit right there about the cognitive dissonance being a hook in itself, that is another huge thing, not just for people within this community, but I believe humanity on the whole. Because, for instance, I've not been able, in my research, to find a religion or a mythology that doesn't have contradictions, impossibilities, like physical impossibilities, like magical impossibilities, cognitive dissonances, as in like definitions that contradict themselves, like a trinity in Christianity, for instance, or simple straight up contradiction in like in Islam, where you've got in an earlier stupa, or whatever they're called, I can't remember what they're called. Are they sutras? Stupas? Bad memory. But in an earlier recitation from Muhammad, he'll be saying one thing and he'll be advocating a behavior to manage that aspect of human goodness or evil. And then in a later one, like post Medina or whatever, he'll be advocating something different. And then you have that. Now you have an inherent contradiction built in, and that produces a cognitive dissonance in the person who encounters it. And that, I'm saying, I think that is a hook, and that's a major part of how religion works. Religion / mythology. That is how a cultural story that is created to bind everybody into one, to get everybody into the one story that we tell ourselves as the reality, as a culture, as a village, as a religion, whatever. That built-in cognitive dissonance point is a key feature. I don't think we find any that don't have that, but that is a brilliant, insightful, ancient use of pushing someone's buttons, using the hook of this thing within us that when something isn't okay, something doesn't make sense, something goes unstable in our environment, we then turn toward it and have to problem solve it for our own safety, to get ourselves back to the point where we can feel like we're okay and safe internally. So, concluding this, and we're coming in at 16 minutes. Okay, this could be done in under 20 minutes. Oh my God, so exciting. The importance of waiting for the helicopter to go by is going to blow my timeline. Fly faster, Lex Luthor. Donald Trump. Ted Rogers in your gold-plated helicopter. Fly on. Thank you. Why do a whole series on looking at what buttons and hooks I can find within myself, or ones that I see happening around me? Well, it's sort of the flip side of the coin to how to work on this stuff for our own selves. It's enormously useful and super fascinating to look at all the different things, all the different ploys and gambits that a narcissist can take, or to pick apart how the narcissist got there and what's going on inside their system that they would do this. That's been such an amazing eye-opener, and also so fascinating and super helpful to help me understand the world around me and the behavior of people around me, but also going into description there. Okay, so one side of the coin, one side of the coin is to look at what the narcissist is doing, but I think it's totally key and necessary to look at the anatomy of our own buttons and hooks that are our susceptibilities, our built-in set of susceptibilities that the narcissist's tricks and behaviors and gambits act on in us. If we dismantled the button, their behavior wouldn't spark us off because it wouldn't be a thing that bothers us. So, in other words, you could if you didn't do the work internally and you didn't bother looking for where all your susceptibilities are, and you just put your efforts into identifying narcissistic behaviors coming from the outside, you'd protect yourself a lot, but an enormous amount of your attention would always have to be in this external hypervigilant defense mode. And there's also which is a waste of your time. Think of all the life that you could be living and things that you could be doing with that energy and that time. But also, you're putting yourself in a position where you could easily fall into projection there, where you start reading too much into other people's behaviors. Or again, like I said in another one, where you see a behavior in somebody and then you go off into the swirl of trying to figure out, does this mean they're actually NPD? Does this mean they're a borderline? Where do they fall in on the dark triad? Like trying to, now maybe even when they're not acting out on you, they're not even doing anything to you today, your mind is still on them instead of you, because you're trying to figure out whether or not they're actually a full-on narcissist or if they're just a dick. So they've still won. They've still hijacked your life from you and made your life about them, made your life into their life. So to find your own buttons and hooks and then work on what it is about these things that are so fraught and scary, so that you heal or recalibrate or resort your wet wiring, recalibrate your internal chemistry rhythms, so that you basically just dismantle the buttons so that the narcissist bullshit doesn't set you off. And that way, you're not just free of the domino effect of their shittiness, but you're also gaining huge chunks of your life back, where you don't have to be defending anymore. You don't have to be on the lookout, because that shit doesn't touch you off anymore. Okay, so that's the importance of buttons and hooks, and looking at that and turning the attention inside into, where am I falling for their bullshit? And in this series, which is not going to be all in a row, I'm going to keep coming back to this every time I find one of these, and we'll just put it up under the same title, and then eventually it can be a playlist. Different areas I find in myself where this is what I'm doing, this is where I'm falling for people's crap. Okay, well, that was as concise as I can make it at this point. 24 minutes? How does understanding narcissism do it, coming in at like 12 minutes? That guy's awesome. Okay, well, there's a goal for myself anyway. All right, I hope you're having a good day. I hope this stuff is of use. Have a great day.